Arcane has officially ended, and that leaves many people wondering what other places are worth exploring within the same world. As most of you know, Arcane is based off of the lore from League of Legends, a game that has been live for well over a decade. In that time, it has branched out with a huge character roster of over 160 champions, dear god, and a world with a dozen of different regions. With Arcane, of course, we had the focus on Piltover and Zaun, with just a little splash of Noxus mixed in, but there are plenty of other ones worth exploring. Based on what Arcane has done with their story, I will be talking about all the possible regions that could be the one to receive the Arcane treatment, and at the end of the video talk about the one I believe most likely to earn the chance of a Studio 4T show. And of course, spoiler warning for both seasons of Arcane. I can't imagine how you got here earlier instead of at the second season of Arcane, but you live your life, man, and just watch this video after watching the show. It's not a question if Arcane was a good show, but there are debates about how faithful the show has treated its original writing. Many of the characters have been written amazingly well. In my personal opinion, I really love the way Vi, Jace, and Echo have been handled. But some have lost much of their original flavor, like Victor, Jinx, and Warwick. Victor in the original lore believed that swapping weaker body parts for mechanical ones is a step to the advancement of mankind. And mind-controlling workers is morally okay, if that means that the worker can be used a lot more safely for both themselves and others. Which is controversial, but he means well. Jinx, as we know her from the game, is a lot more mentally insane. Like, way deeper down the bottom of a barrel than we see in Arcane. Arcane Jinx feels a lot more like she dipped her toes in the insanity, but otherwise takes much more of a sad and depressed route after reaching a breaking point that the show has made her go through. Which, although realistic for a person to react to, for Jinx it kind of feels like a waste, especially since the first season was the whole arc of her embracing the madness, and outside of Arcane, Jinx now feels very weird and kinda too different from her Arcane counterpart, but maybe the character can lose her mind years down the line in the true lore. But we won't know. And last of these examples is Warwick. A man that shares his body with a bloodthirsty beast that can't seem to shed its bloodlust. And in the beginning of the second season, they made a great setup for Warwick to go full feral after his head gets blown clean off by a little terrorist gremlin. It could have been the great opportunity to lose the Vander side and completely regrow back into the wolf head, but in the end of the show, he got turned into a goon for the main antagonist and nothing more, which, in my opinion, is the greatest waste of the show. From all of these examples, what we can see from Studio 4T, they do heavily value the redeeming qualities of the champions that they use and creating the possibility of a way back. And with the pretty open ending of the show, there is still plenty of character growth for all of them to go through. Arcane is not the end of Vi, Caitlyn, Jinx, Echo, but merely a prequel to where every one of them will be in the current lore. Jinx can still go mentally crazy. Warwick can turn more feral the more wounds he receives and regenerates. Victor can still open up a cute little shop in Zaun after being the Messiah for a little bit, and then give laser eyes to a kid for a couple of days. Many other characters from Arcane have not given up on these three. They have all been given the chance of a way back if the writers wish to do so. It is also a sign that the writers rather want you to sympathize with a character instead of despise them. Even many of the antagonists like Ambessa, Silco, and Singed have been given reasons to justify their actions, and the audience has been given a way to understand and like the characters a little bit more. Of course, that doesn't go for every character in the show, but the ones that get fleshed out do get a lot of love from the writers. The world and the region has been giving some lore changes as well. With Hextech, for example, did you know that in the original lore, it was the physical manifestation of the souls from a giant purple scorpion race called the Bracken that live on the ground and merge their memories with each following generation, resulting in the little blue rock being a collection of thousands of sentient souls? Bet you didn't? Neither did League themselves. That's why they accidentally wrote a pop star that's a sadistic psychopath, constantly hearing the agonizing screams on her personal stage under her feet. But that's nothing a huge retcon of existing lore can fix. So what more about Piltover and Zaun? What did the original do that Arcane didn't? In the original lore, they are in neighboring cities, but one and the same. Piltover is built right over Zaun, like right on top of it. And the only way to travel from Zaun to Piltover would have been with a giant elevator called the Howler. It has that name because every time it's used, you can hear the machine scream all throughout Zaun. The rivalry between those cities used to be a lot more about how it was a privilege to be up in Piltover. But if you are in Piltover, there was always the looming threat that if you weren't advancing your science fast enough, or you turn into a life of crime, or you were just a dumbass, you could be sent to the literal criminal underworld. And that's why in the original lore, Piltovans despise Zaunites, seeing them as criminal scum and a bunch of idiots. And Zaunites see Piltover as the utopia that they can only dream of to reach from underneath. It is pretty similar to how Arcane treats it, but also just a little bit different. So from all of this, we know that like most media, the writers do take creative liberties when it comes to the original source material, but they do want to be similar enough to respect it. Also, the writers want to give themselves plenty of windows for the characters to swing one way or another when it comes to where they can end up. So when we are going to be talking about the other regions from League of Legends, we can assume that Doomsday scenarios need an undo button, and staple characters from the region need plenty of chances to swap motivation and mindsets. Noxus has had a lot of screen time during Arcane. We already caught plenty of glimpses of their culture of war, how they worship the god the Wolf, which is the cruel second half of the Death God that only comes after those that die fighting. We also see how they want to continue the advancement of warfare, and how they deal with the corruption of the Black Rose deep within their capital city. And we've even seen a painting of the capital city painted by Mel in the first season of Arcane. And again, spoilers for the end of season 2, we get the reveal that the crows that we have been seeing throughout Arcane were from Swain, the Grand General of Noxus. This all makes a pretty good setup for Noxus as a tie-in with Arcane. We can get a story about the power struggle within Noxus, and how the loss of Mbessa has created a power vacuum, and many things could be changing in that time. We could learn more of the Black Rose and see new stories about characters like the brothers Darius and Draven, assassin hijinks with Talon and Katarina, or even learn about the threats lurking beneath the immortal bastion, like Briar, Scion, and last but not least, Mordekaiser, someone who has already taken over the world twice without that even being the goal while he was alive at that time. The only way I really see a show being made about Noxus, however, is if they are starting a new invasion. That way we could see more different environments other than Grey Rocks, which most of Noxus exists out of, but that could also probably make Noxus look more like the antagonist, and we have already seen them do that in Arcane, so in my opinion it would be more fun to give another region the spotlight, and therefore I am excluding Noxus as a potential candidate. The intro, the wow factor. In the very first episode of Arcane, it took a moment to show the audience the unfamiliar world of Runeterra. Unique architectures and objects that are just a little bit different from ours, a bunch of weird humanoid creatures just casually walking around, and different colors of natural hair like pink and blue. The region wants to reel you in with its unique identity, and throughout the series show more and more of what Piltover and Zaun have to offer. So the region of the next show should be able to do similar things. Unfamiliar, but just normal enough for us to understand what's going on, and beautiful visuals. Studio Fortiche also prides themselves in the way they do lighting in their shows, and they really do like to play around with colors a lot. So the next region should account for all of those things. That way Studio Fortiche can flex what they're good at. With those examples, here are some regions that I think will probably not get a show because of these things. Bandle City. Bandle City is the home of Yordles, like Heimerdinger that we've seen in Arcane. It's a place full of magic and empty of logic. It's a place able to make portals all throughout Runeterra for the Yordles to travel through, while Bandle City itself is kind of in its own pocket dimension, just chilling somewhere. This region probably will not get a series, since a large group of fluffy, magical, silly animals are hard to relate to, and it's really difficult to make a very serious show about a race that doesn't take themselves that seriously. And next is Targon. Targon is a mountain that is filled with monsters and convicts of other regions that have been sent there as banishment to try to climb the mountain and become a vessel for one of the gods. This region can get a sort of survival series where we follow a character and their group to reach the top of the mountain, with the group getting smaller and smaller over time until the top is reached and a new ascended god is born. But that's all very permanent, with a lot of characters that should realistically die. Because if it was easy to climb that mountain, a lot more people would be doing it, and a lot more gods would be walking around. Freljord. I love Freljord. It's my favorite region. Fantasy Viking land. And although it does have a lot of different terrain and mythical places and cool characters, and I love it! There's also a whole lot of ice all over the place. So for variety of color, it can get pretty rough, and that's why I'm excluding Freljord. And the last one that gets kicked out this round is the Shadow Isles. A spooky region with a fuck ton of ghosts that are all green and all dead. There also isn't much story that's worth covering, especially after the Ruination event became a huge fiasco and kind of a laughingstock among the League lore fans. And the game Ruined King also covered quite a lot about the region. So if you do want to learn about the Shadow Isles, go play the Ruined King game. Now, me saying this of course does not mean that these regions aren't going to get a show. Studio Fortiche can easily throw a curveball and do something cool with it. But to me, it makes the most sense that intro a tale already told. There have been other pieces of media that covered the lore of League of Legends outside of Arcane. For a short while, there was the concept of something called Riot Forge, where Riot gave the license of the universe of League of Legends to smaller game studios to make a wide plethora of games for. That means that there have been games that cover the most important story of a whole region, namely the game Mage Seeker, where you play as Silas, who joins a rebellion in Demacia to fight for the free use of magic within the border of their lands. This means that there is still definitely a chance for a big budget show to happen. Demacia is a huge central city, which offers a lot of protection from mages, so many people would have reasons to go there, but I don't think it's worth to repeat a large part of a story, especially since the people most excited for a show about a different region in League of Legends are already fans of the lore, and have likely played or watched the Mage Seeker. So therefore I am excluding Demacia. Now this might be a bit more of a sensitive topic regarding modern cinema. It is a fact that streaming services will often make demands for a show to uphold to. And those demands are almost always about diversity in ethnicity, gender and sexuality. Having a wide plethora of different characters also makes it easier for more different people to find a character to relate to. Like for example, a single parent struggling to make a living while taking care of their kids can relate to Vander. People who contemplate about how short life is and really wish to work hard to leave their mark in the world can relate to Victor. Someone that is dealing with excessive amounts of stress while also trying to figure out a situationship they don't want to mess up can relate to both Vi and Caitlyn. I could keep going with examples, but we will be here all day. The point is that every character is incredibly unique and different. Arcane has used that as an amazing tool for story writing. For world building, it also makes sense that this region is very diverse. Piltover is a central city. People from all over the world travel to it, and it is made even easier with the presence of the Hex Gates. It is also the city of progress, so anyone with a good head on their shoulders think of it as their Garden of Eden, where they can finally get to chase after their passion projects. So with the real life demands that Netflix is more likely going to push, there are some other regions that will also be probably excluded, namely Shurima. Shurima is a big fuck off desert. It's dealing with void corruption, returned ascendant that have lost their marbles, and the return of Egyptian superpowered Abraham Lincoln. Cool place, a lot of stuff going on, but there isn't a lot of diversity since all of them are Egyptian inspired, and people don't really travel to Shurima much. Ionia. This might disappoint a lot of people, because I do think that Ionia might be the most famous region, but Ionia is very closed off, with the only outsiders are, once again, Noxians. I will say that if my guess for the next region is wrong, I do think that Ionia might be the runner-up purely for the amount of people that love the region and the champions that come from it. Characters like Yasuo, Ahri, Jhin, and Master Yi have never really lost any popularity. But Ionia is also incredibly inspired by Asian culture. The people from Ionia look Asian, which isn't diverse. And once again, I will also be naming Freljord again, since it's fantasy Scandinavia, so it's 2 strikes, and therefore very unlikely for Freljord to get a show, but I really want one. Alright, that's every region down, except for one. Oh wait, there's 2 actually. There's a land called Ishtal, which is an isolated place with a sassy princess and a boomer scorpion that lost all his previous interesting lore. So into the bin with that one for now. But the region most likely for an Arcane-like show has got to be Bilgewater, a set of islands full of pirates, thrill seekers, sea legends, and strange cults. There is an insane amount of story potential within Bilgewater. It is a very central city, so there's plenty of chance for different champions to find themselves within Bilgewater. There has been a game from Riot Forge that did start in Bilgewater, but most of the game is about exploring the Shadow Isles and its themes, sadly abandoning a lot of the potential in Bilgewater, but the game did leave a good example of how it can make sense for champions like Braum, Yasuo, and Ahri to visit it, which gives Studio Fortiche a perfect opportunity to use almost any champion they want. And in terms of Bilgewater champions, there is a huge amount of diversity as well, covering all kinds of interesting personality and even different cultures between all of them. The most grand scale story I could imagine can be about the rivalry between Gangplank and Misfortune, 2 pirate captains that aim to be the leader of Bilgewater, both urging for very different methods of how to rule the seas. We can have Alawi act as a third party, showing a more mystical side of the world and what an active god, like the one she follows, is able to do. We can have Twisted Fate and Graves constantly backstabbing the people that hire them and watch them get knee-deep into trouble. And on the seas themselves, we can have encounters with plenty of legendary creatures, like Nautilus, the Bearded Lady, or a spectral ambush from the Revenant Pike. We can have the Harrowing, which is a yearly occurrence where the black mist of the Shadow Isles creeps into the streets of Bilgewater, unleashing tortured souls and causing mayhem. We can have underground fighting pits, hosted by Jack the Winner, a champion that is exclusive to the Legend of Runeterra card game. We can have so many different islands, coral reefs, open caves, and so much more. It is, in my opinion, by far the best region to get an Arcane-like show. It has such a perfect sandbox for the writers to dig in and explore how many different things they can do with it. It's perfect! The genuine only problem I can imagine to be the wall to prevent Bilgewater from becoming a thing is water. Water is notoriously difficult to animate, but Studio Fortiche has often blended 2D and 3D animation together, so perhaps there's a chance of making all the water 2-dimensional, which could be very cool looking if done well, and it can kind of show how if the characters are on the sea, they look out of place enough for the audience to know that wherever they're sailing, they shouldn't be there. They don't belong on those seas with all the danger lurking underneath. It can be such a cool aspect of the show. And with all of that said, I would put my money on Bilgewater. In fact, I really want it to be Bilgewater.